Another cold morning to wake up to, this one with a little bit of cloudiness over the southern part of our state. We were below zero again for the fourth night in a row. Yesterday was the fourth straight day with a high temperature of 10 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, and we stand to do the same thing, be at 10 or colder, at least through and including the coming Monday. If that happens, we will tie the all-time lengthiest streak in Madison's history, any time of year, where the temperature does not get above 10 degrees Fahrenheit for a daytime high, 10 straight days in a row. The last time that happened was mid-January 1963. So we're on pace to have no particularly unusually cold days within this streak, but an unbelievably record length of such cold. And the month is averaging already about 14 degrees below normal, and we're about halfway through, because February is a short month, we're about halfway through it. So this morning's map shows a giant anticyclone region of high pressure gradually easing itself into the central part of the country, and here we are in the Great Lakes states with almost no wind, and that is a consequence of the large distance between successive white lines on this map. These white lines are lines of constant sea level pressure, so-called isobars, and they're very far apart over the northern plains, almost as far apart over Wisconsin and Lake Michigan. So we have no winds, some light snow flurries just to our south. We may even see one ourselves today, and it may dust the ground in Milwaukee County and places in the northern counties of Illinois during the day today, but nothing particularly sensational in terms of the snow. But we may see a flurry to mix in with our temperatures at or below 10 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. So a really nice wintry stretch we've got going here. And in the eastern part of the United States, unsettled weather has moved well offshore. There's a big storm I'll show you a little bit about in a minute over the North Atlantic south of Greenland. But over the eastern United States, almost no unsettled weather. This little bit of precipitation, mixed rain and snow and ice in Kentucky and parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and North Texas, some freezing rain, but mostly light snow in and around our vicinity. And then even the west coast of the United States, as I mentioned on Monday, seemed like a pretty benign weather pattern was evolving for the west coast after a period of battery over the last couple of weeks. They're really getting a little bit of a break. So that's the weather across the country this morning is rather benign in terms of organized weather systems. The temperatures are another story. It's quite dramatically cold in a lot of places. Now, if you go well down to the Gulf Coast, you're talking at 8 o'clock Eastern Time in Florida, 7 o'clock Eastern Time in places like New Orleans and all the way down to Brownsville. Exceptionally warm, actually, quite warm right along the coast. 74 Miami, 68 to the near Brownsville, north of Brownsville, Texas. 59 near Houston. So pretty warm in the immediate coastal regions of the Gulf Coast and the South Atlantic coast. But other than that, it's chilly. You go up to Washington, D.C., 33 degrees, 21 in Boston, -4 at Caribou, -1 in Madison, -3 at Green Bay, -25 near International Falls. The coldest temperatures are in central Montana, just to the east of the Rockies. So the high plains of Montana were in the high 20s, -27 at Kalispell and Great Falls. So really cold places. And this cold air has really got no place to go but move southward with the region of high pressure. So yesterday we got to 10. That's going to maybe be the warmest temperature we see for that 10-day period for a high temperature. And we're probably going to be a degree or two colder than that every day in the coming week as even more cold air advection occurs and funnels in over us to reinforce the cold that we've been experiencing this week. The satellite movie over the continental United States and adjacent waters is kind of interesting today. We can see first the cloud street that goes all the way from the desert southwest across the central plains just south of us, kind of on the Wisconsin-Illinois border, and then maybe reappears across Pennsylvania, parts of the middle Atlantic states. So that's the only cloud streak across the entire continental 48 states today, with the exception of a couple of cumulus clouds that pop up over Florida and maybe southern Mississippi. But that is it. A little bit of this, as we just saw on the Weather Channel map, is snowy, and a little bit might be rainy, and we'll see that in a minute in the radar. This storm right here, well south of Greenland, churning away in the North Atlantic, is quite a beast of a storm. This is the event that came across the Middle Atlantic states earlier, late in the weekend and early in the last week, or early this week, and it's just been moving slowly eastward and developing and expanding in its scale. It's occupying a huge part of the North Atlantic Ocean, and I'll show you that in just a second after we look at the radar across the country. Actually, we'll look at this storm next. And the way I'm going to show you is by going to a satellite site that I found in Norway. So here's the same storm, but now look where we are. This is Western Europe, North Africa, And here's the Canadian Maritime provinces. And so it's a funny projection of the North Pole is right about where the cursor is. So this is the scale of this enormous storm. I want you to take a look at that. There's Iceland, southern Greenland. I'll animate it again. Iceland, southern Greenland, the British Isles, Iberia, North Africa. So this is a huge event that's just spinning around and occupying the entire North Atlantic Ocean. And you get a nice view of what it looks like in its own location there. The central pressure of this thing is down to about 970 or so millibars, which is not that exceptionally low for this time of year, but it is a really intense low pressure system, but not unduly so, as it turns out. So let's take a look at the radar over our own country, and we can notice the difference in complexion, the way that these radar reflectivity returns look. This is kind of an almost ghostly light blue over northern Missouri, central Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and then cutting across into Lake Michigan. That is the difference between these more well-defined echoes that are across Kentucky, southern Missouri, parts of southern Indiana, and extreme southern Ohio. So you can see it visually. The difference between what looks blurry and a little bit fuzzy compared to what's really sharp is the fact that the sharper echoes almost surely involve raindrops of one kind or another, either frozen raindrops, sleet particles with a little bit of liquid water on them, or actually rain falling, hitting the ground and freezing, and that's freezing rain in some of these locations. And contrast that with the reflectivity that comes back off the irregularly shaped snowflakes. And so all of this reflectivity is a little bit less intense because it's hard to bounce a radar beam off of an irregularly shaped and kind of constantly changing in its complexion, in its orientation, a snowflake. Whereas a spherical or close to spherical raindrop, doesn't matter how the radar radiation hits it, it's going to bounce back with pretty much a uniform reflectivity. And you can really see the difference there. Sometimes one can be misled to think that these are less intense precipitation echoes, when in fact really what they are is just worse reflectivity because of the shape of the object that's reflecting the radiation that comes from the transmitter on the radar. So snow and rain, obviously different in the way they present themselves on the radar. And yet that's all there is across much of the country today, is just that one band in the Central Plains just to our south, as we mentioned earlier. And finally, here's the satellite movie off the west coast of the United States in adjacent waters. The state of Hawaii is right where the cursor is, so you get an idea of where we are geographically. And again, quite different from the first couple of weeks of class where we saw one storm after another raking either the northwest coast of the United States or the southern coast of the United States. No such events this week. We saw Monday and then just a little bit of cloudiness over California today, but not any serious precipitation. Generally, we have pretty decent weather across the west coast of the United States. All the unsettled weather is well out in the Pacific. We see a stream of clouds coming straight poleward from, again, here's Hawaii. This is deep in the tropics, heading straight up into the Gulf of Alaska, and then a pretty decent looking storm, complete with a pocket of really cold air at upper levels, signified by these sort of popcorn looking cumulus clouds that I've putting the cursor on there. This is a pretty decent storm at about the dateline, but it's going to have a really tough time making much eastward progress because there's a big block in the flow on the west coast of North America, and that's preserving the west coast of our own country from any more inundation as we've been suffering. So, pretty interesting weather across the nation today.